Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Revolution. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That always helps. And if you're listening online to podcast, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. Those do help. And let your friends know about this. Well, welcome to Revolution, everybody. It's Sunday. What's today's date? I don't even know. It's like the May 4th or 3rd or something. Who knows? Well, here we are again. Another Sunday. How did you enjoy Brian Yarborough last week, right? Wow, that guy. Brian's awesome. I'm so glad he spoke. Pulled him out of speaking retirement. And just a hell of a friend. And I appreciate his words. Good morning. That's nice. Everybody's saying good morning. Good morning. Hello. So it was nice. So I've had the kids for like 3 weekends now, and just because sometimes the parenting schedule gets a little woo. So lots of kiddos, lots of cooking, and I have one of those dishwashers that are like this big in my apartment. It's not like an actual, it's like hooked up to the sink. And so for about the past 3 weeks, I've been doing dishes, more and more dishes than I've ever imagined my life to ever do. So it's been quite an experience. Yeah, but man, the kids are great. We're having fun. Son played ultimate frisbee yesterday, and that was really cool. It was. I appreciate Brian filling in for me. It was nice to be able to just have a break and be with the kids and do my stuff. Their mom's with them this morning, so I can do this, be with you guys, and then we'll try to figure out an adventure for today. So we're gonna try to get through Galatians, everybody. This year has really struggled for us to get through Galatians, and honestly, so much crazy, horrific news in the world. It's hard to keep up at this point. And I did a podcast this week. It'll be up soon. I'll let you guys know when it's up. But an interview with some podcasters this week. And it was really great because originally we were like, well, there's so much going on in the world, Jay. Let's get you on and talk about it. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. It just ended up going in a different direction. We didn't talk about politics. We didn't talk about, we did talk about religious politics in a way, but not really like politics. And it was nice. It was good. It just went in a kind of completely different direction than I think any of us expected. And it was really positive. And it was just kind of us, sharing what it's like to do this work when you're professional and when you have degrees and when you're self-taught and just the different ins and outs of that. And so it was really cool. I'll let you guys know when it's up. So yeah, we're going to try to get through Galatians. We're not going to finish Galatians today, obviously, but we're going to talk a little bit about Galatians, and I'm excited about that. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think, is there any other updates for you guys? We're just trying to, grow Revolution, doing some things behind the scenes. Looking at ways that maybe we can bring a few pieces of merch back just to, but in a way that won't be completely stressful or crazy. Because some of you folks have been asking for certain things like, oh, we'd love some more Revolution stuff. So maybe do some of that. But anyhow, you saw Brian. You know the goal. But today we're going to be in Galatians 4. And I think it's probably going to hit us all in a good way today. So once again, for you those just joining us, welcome to Revolution Gathering. If this is your church, thanks for making it that place. If this is just a gathering for you, thanks for coming. I just appreciate you all being here. And if you're not following along with us on the Galatians, if you haven't been, because it's been so sparse all over the place, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You can go back and listen later, or you can not listen again. I think these sections today will definitely kind of stay in their lane and what Paul's doing. Just a kind of a brief reminder that the book of Galatians was written to the Gauls in Galatia, and the Gauls and Jewish Christians who are having a hard time getting together. The Jewish Christians were kind of pressuring the Gauls to become more Jewish and to be circumcision. And it actually wasn't even them, it was some teachers who came in and tried to change some things. Some religious teachers said, well, these people need to do more. And Paul was saying, no, it's about grace. And they seemed to really drive a wedge within the community. So this letter was kind of it's so many different levels for such a short letter. It's a letter of rebuke. It's a letter of grace. It's a letter of hope. It's a letter of unity and equality. There's so much to it. It's really powerful, and probably why it's one of my favorite books in the Bible. And also, I feel like it becomes more and more relevant, unfortunately. Sometimes I wish it would be a little less relevant within our time, because there's so much, there'd be a little bit more positive in the world, that we wouldn't be so divided. But it's really for folks who are dealing with division. And I'm sure we're all dealing with that one way or another in our lives. So, Galatians 4, we ended at one of my favorite parts in Galatians about, there's no longer Jew or Greek, there's no longer slave or free, there is no longer male or female, we're all one in Christ. That's one of my favorites. But we jump down to 4, and I'm going to, there's a lot about like what it's to be an heir and what it's like to law, but I'm going to jump down to 8. I decided, since we're not doing a big, since this one isn't, such a scholarly dive this year around. Last year we did 16 parts to the Galatians study because we really jumped into the scholarship. But I feel like there's some stuff that we can jump over a little bit for time's sake. And because I've got some ideas after Galatians as well that I would like to get to. So we're going to jump from Galatians 4:1. We're actually just going to jump down to 4:8. So Paul in his letter says, formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to beings that by nature are not gods. And so he's talking about false gods and different ideas and things like that. I think he's talking to the Gauls right now. That you am now, but by nature are not gods. Now, however, that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God. I always think that's an interesting sentence that he says there. How can you turn your back again to the weak and beggarly elemental spirits? How can you want to be enslaved to them again? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid that my work for you have all been wasted. And so he's literally saying, like, if you're going to follow back into the law, if you're going to follow back into so this is very radical stuff, especially at the time. He's saying, like, if you're going to go back into thinking that, observing certain holidays, special days, months, years, things like that, if you're going to start going into that and thinking that that has something to do with your relationship to Christ or your relationship to Christianity, you're missing the point. And oh my goodness, if Christianity was known for one thing, especially in the States, probably all over the world in its history, is missing the point. We constantly miss the point of Christ. We constantly miss the point of even these teachers, apostles, and people, of what they're trying to tell us. And we see that so much now. You see it a lot right now with very popular pop evangelicalism that you see in the world. And you see the, like, they care about this, but they don't care about that. You see a lot of hypocrisy, if you will, within that world. And I'm not here to condemn it. I'm just here to say that that's just the reality of it. It's like, oh, well, we're pro-life, but we support the death penalty, or we're pro-life, but we support war. This type of thing. It's like, well, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't quite add up. It seems to be the type of contradiction that you're able to see and make a change. I mean, some contradictions we have to live with. Some contradictions bring us to a higher sense of truth. And these contradictions probably send us at least just to the truth of saying that this is a type of hypocrisy, or at least it's not a logical way of thinking. So I think that's important for us to look at. I was reading, there's so many folks out there, a lot of the deconstructionists and folks like that right now. There's a lot of critique and critics about the church right now. And I worry a little bit about that because sometimes it just becomes kind of hateful. Nietzsche said, those who fight monsters should be careful to not become monsters themselves. And so sometimes we stoop to the level of those folks and we critique in which becomes kind of a hateful, very hateful, judgmental way, rather than saying like, no, we're just looking for consistency. We're looking for something that actually works. Pointing out inconsistency isn't hateful. Pointing out inconsistency is trying to be helpful, I think, and to help people grow and people to understand, help people to come out of their ignorance and to learn and to be educated. It's very important. So that's what you have is Paul saying here. He's like, you're going back to these things, and it's almost, and this is what's really amazing about this portion here, is he's telling them, like, going back to these Jewish customs and thinking they have something to do with your faith might as well be worshiping other gods. You might as well be worshiping other things, because this isn't Christianity. And he's going to nail it down, he's going to, no pun intended, to what the vital, important part of this stuff really is. And so we've got to listen to that. But he's saying, has my work been in vain when you go back to these useless ways? And we see, what I've seen in this world is that Christianity seems to have like, okay, you got to be at church on Sunday, we're going to have church on Wednesday night. What are you doing? If you don't stand up at worship, you don't do certain things, people, oh, what's going on? What's happening? We kind of become like these guardians of these traditions. And what Paul is reminding us is these traditions, might be nice and they might be valuable to some, but they're not vital. These traditions are not vital. And I think that's often the problem, is when we get involved, especially with denominations that have all these different traditions and stuff. They're just nice. It's cute. It's adorable. Some of it's helpful, some of it's not, but it's not anything to really do with your faith. And sometimes I think people feel like grace and faith and forgiveness is just not enough. And so we're trying to add more to it. Like, well, let's just add this and we'll do this, and trying to be more official. We're going to run our church like a corporation. We're going to do we're going to think like this, or we're going to have a political party that we tell you to be a part of. And Paul is saying, when you get into these concepts and these ideas and these other things, these other laws, and this type of legalism, or creating a law, rebuilding the law is what he was afraid of here, rebuilding the Old Testament law, the Jewish law. But here he's, but for us, we create new laws in the church. This sin we think's really bad, and instead of sin being separation, we get all these particular sins, and we become like these like sin monitors, like, oh, this one's bad. Oh, we gossip. Well, we all gossip a little bit. Oh, but don't do that one, because that's So we don't really stay consistent with things. And what he's saying here is, when you start doing these things and think that they have your salvation, it's just pointless. This is worthless. You're getting drawn away from something that's really valuable. And I would go as far as saying, literally, like, that's probably most of Christianity in America today has quite a bit of those things, that they have created these type of sacred cows that we have, that are just cows. That's it. Nothing sacred about them. So Paul says here, I'm afraid that my work for you has been wasted. And listen to what he says in 12. Friends, I beg of you to become as I am, for I also have become as you are. You have done me no wrong. And what he wants them is to say, become free. Free yourself from these things. Understand you are accepted. We'll probably go through Tillich's talk this year about you are accepted by that greater than yourself, something that you have to understand more, believe more, think more. You just are accepted. And he's saying, I'm free of these things, become as I am. And he's trying to encourage those who are trying to push people to fall into these traditions and rules as a part of their faith, saying, don't push these folks. You guys need to be free of these things. And the folks who don't already have this stuff don't need to add this stuff to their life. I mean, if they want to make it as something they like to do, part of their sublate, part of community, fantastic. But when it becomes about your faith, when it becomes about your salvation, when it becomes about following Christ as some sort of like must thing you have to check off the box, he's saying it's pointless. And you're really throwing it all away. Earlier in Galatians, he says something similar in Galatians 2:21. He goes, I do not nullify the grace of God, for if justification comes through the law, then Christ died for nothing. He's saying, either we're justified through Christ, but if we try to be justified by anything else, it's pointless. If you can't create a new law, you can't create new ideals of what you have to do. There are things that I think are very valuable, and love is, you'll see, is a big part of that. But loving your neighbor, there's so much that we could do to build one another up, to help one another, to recognize each other's humanity and equality as human beings by not scapegoating each other, by not pointing out, well, you have this and and I don't have this, or that, and getting into these competitions that continue to divide us. There's so much more work and hard stuff we can do to be in community. That's why I talk about arguing well, because arguing well is tough. Giving grace is tough. Loving your enemy is very tough. I struggle with it. We all struggle with this idea, and I always try to remind everybody that it's progress, not perfection. So Paul is saying, don't fall into this. Don't fall into these old ways. Don't allow these traditions to distract you. Don't make it to nullify what's really valuable. And we'll see. I'm about to show you what's valuable. I'm guessing you could probably guess. I'm going to jump over to 5:1. You go, wow, Jay, you're skipping a lot. There's some good stuff here, and I'm going to jump back into it. But he basically, when I'm jumping over, is basically him just saying to remind you that you are a promise, that you are a member of the family, that you are accepted, that you are loved. But in 5:1 it says, for freedom of Christ has set you free. It really boils down to this, and this is the big part of it, the meaning of what he was saying here anyway. For the freedom of Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery. And I think a lot of us who get into deconstruction or rethinking our faith or left the faith altogether or really don't want anything to do with Christianity, which I feel like you see a lot of people feel that way, usually based on seeing really bad stuff in the church. He's saying, don't get caught up in the yoke of slavery. I'll say, my early life in Christianity, that's what I kind of felt like it was. I always felt like I was having to please the master, and then I was completely disappointing, that I could never do enough, I could never be good enough, I could never love enough, I could never abstain enough from certain things. And it was really someone who said, pretty much said the same thing Paul says here, is, you're trying to earn your salvation. You can't earn it. This is a free thing. It's a free gift. And you can't, there's just not a way to, you've got it, you can't earn it. And the best you can do is accept that you're accepted. And that changed my whole way of thinking. My friend D.E. Polk, I share some of his stuff on my Instagram sometimes, really made that clear to me. And it was so refreshing. It was a struggle, though, to kind of grasp it, because when you're taught something for so long, to think away about religion. I'll give you an example. Recently, I've kind of discovered that I probably have ADHD. So I've been reading a book about it. And in the book, there's so much stuff that I feel free hearing, because so many of my struggles that other people struggle with, and then I'm not like, oh, well, maybe I'm not lazy. Maybe I'm not, a bad person and all this stuff. You feel so good about that. But I've spent so many years of my life hearing voices in my head saying, no, you're lazy, you're a bad person, you don't do enough, you need to do more of this, you need to do less of that, that even reading the book and seeing like things I struggle with written out and shared by other people, because even this book, they actually have other people sharing their experiences too. And recognizing it, there's still a part of me that goes, no, you're not one of them. You're just really not good. You're really just a lazy person. Oh, you're just. So it takes us a long time to unlearn those things. There was a Yoda quote that's like, you must unlearn what you've learned or something. I wish I could remember what Yoda said. It was, Yoda, since it's May the 4th. Oh, it is May the 4th. You must unlearn what you have learned. And it's my Yoda. And so we get caught in that, and it's really hard to shake free from that. Even if you're reading it, like you read it in the Bible, and you're like, well, this can't be true. I mean, I remember calling my dad when I first discovered grace, being like, why do we never talk about this? And he said to me, he said, well, it always felt too good to be true. And it's really a sad state when you have Christian leaders and who influence the world sat with presidents saying, yeah, that whole grace thing, it was just really tough. I didn't talk a lot about it because it seemed too good to be true. And I'm like, it's kind of the foundation of the whole message, and my mom always got it, but she got it with more of a love way of God love you. God doesn't make any junk. We're all made of the same old stuff. God loves everybody. It's people who make it complicated. And so that idea is she always got grace at the heart. And my dad was studying, but he just had too much tradition often in his brain, too much Assemblies of God, too much, denominational stuff, too many leaders who were doing their best, but probably trying to control each other, and because it happens over time. And so you come in and you learn all this controlling people and being legalistic and giving people hard times, and then you think it's God, you think it's Christianity. So there's a lot of people who will get angry when they hear me speak and they're talking to me because they don't think you're deconstructing anything. They think you're attacking their faith because their faith is built on certain holidays, abstaining from certain things, not from traditions and ideas that they have been told is Christianity. And so it becomes hard for them to believe that. That's why arguing well, having tough discussions, talking about this stuff is so vital and so important. Recommending good books, and because people are going to really struggle to separate, like, oh, well, this is mixed with that. When we get religion and politics mixed together, and people start thinking like, oh, well, Christianity and politics and this, and it must be all intertwined. It's like, no. We've got to separate those things. We've got to remember, like, loving our neighbor, what does that look like? That can affect our politics, but those two can't always be in together. Or these rules and these regulations or these traditions come in, and we think they're Christianity. And so you have to work to separate those things. And that's tough work, especially if you've been trained within a denomination and you went to their seminary and you went to their schools and you did all this stuff and you've been taught to read the Bible a certain way. Even some of my commentaries I've purchased over the years, Bible commentaries and Bible stuff, you come to realize later when you start studying actual scholarship and really quality scholarship in Hebrew and Greek and stuff, you realize, wow, some of these commentaries and stuff, this is just apologetics. But I thought because it was in this book that this was true. And, there's just tradition. This is just like evangelical tradition, or this is just, Calvinist tradition written in, this is from their viewpoint. This isn't the Bible. This is just somebody's ideas and views, or someone trying to make this thing fit with this thing. And so you really have to do some deprogramming and some deconstruction. But I think deconstruction is best when we're learning what is and isn't, not going and saying, well, I'm just going to condemn everybody that isn't, because those folks need it as well. Those folks need that hope. It's like, getting a life preserver and then you get 20 of them and you're just holding them going like, I'm not going to give them to these people because they didn't give me any. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not going to help them because they didn't help me. I'm angry at them. But you're the first one. You're the one doing it. So, are you going to take it back, or are you just going to judge them for not being able to get to where you were? You might be a little bit smarter. You might have been a little bit clever. You might have just been a little bit luckier to get to that place to deconstruct and to rethink things. But by then just going back and condemning them, how does it feel when you're condemned? How does it feel when you're called an asshole? How does it feel when you're called, these things? That's probably why you're doing that. Don't return the evil for evil. Don't return judgment for judgment. because that's a trap that keeps us divided, and it doesn't help. It doesn't grow. It doesn't move anything. It doesn't make Christianity better. It just creates more us's and them's, and that's not what we're called to do. And that's what Paul's trying to do here, is saying we've got grace, and so he's trying to remind them, remember what I said. Remember the grace. Remember that these things have nothing to do with your salvation. Do not use these for reasons to separate one another or to tear each other apart. Remember what really brings us together. What's really important is the community and faith and love and these things, not these things that continue to separate us. And we've got to learn that on both sides. You're always going to feel that your side is a little bit more tolerant, a little bit better, and it probably maybe is. But you have to understand that these people might just be ignorant of what you've learned. They don't know what you've learned. They don't know what they've done. Or it's just become a control system in their life, and there's insecurities. I mean, often people think if you take, I remember years ago, this pastor's wife was here at Revolution in Atlanta. And I said, well, I don't think the flood was a literal story. I think it was just, a telling of a story to help us understand. And the pastor's wife came to me and said, but if you start taking things out and not seeing them as true, it's like it's like a house of cards. It all fall apart. And that's the thing, is we've kind of created this system that seems like a deck of cards that we can't touch. And the Bible is just a collection of books. Our faith isn't the stick. You take things out and it all falls apart. I mean, there's only a few things. It's only really that foundation there. And we have to kind of grow from that and see what that helps us do. We're looking at, 2,000-year-old letters, and they're not always the letters from the people they say they are. I mean, it's not an easy thing to always go through. And there's a reason why there's been so much misunderstanding. But hopefully we can clear up that misunderstanding. Hopefully if you enter into something like deconstruction, or just really studying for the first time in depth of the Bible and scholarship, we will return with good news and something better and something newer. I mean, that's how reformations start, is that people start to read things. I mean, for the Reformation with Martin Luther, I mean, he read the book of Galatians and all of a sudden realized, oh, it's about grace. It's not about indulgences. It's not about sacrificing certain things or doing this. I'm loved. I'm accepted just the way I am. He's faith alone. All of a sudden he was blown away. And that's how the Reformation started. And so that's the type of thing, is when we start to pay attention and to realize what this is really about, that's when a reformation happens. And that's where we're at again. And we need one desperately, because look at the place that America's in. I mean, Christians are so divided, it's ridiculous. And right now, some of the loudest Christians seem like the most bizarre and judgmental types we've seen in a long time. It seems like the 80s Christians are making a little bit of a comeback. And for us is to be well informed and be able to say, oh, well, the problem is now online you can't be like, I was reading this thing and I wanted to be like, well, I'm a pastor, we're not all like that. And then people are like, oh, not all Christians, not all men. So now there's a group of people, and I hate to say it, but progressive people have almost made it impossible for us to argue and defend ourselves and defend each other. And we really have to get away from that shit. That's just some bullshit. I'm going to call it out right now. Like, not all something is always true. Like, it's not, nuance is a part of life. So if someone says, well, I'm not like that. I'm a man and I don't think that way. You go, oh, great. Can you help us figure out why other men think that way? Can we help it? Yeah, we can work together. But don't get someone for saying, well, I'm not that way. Well, you'd be like, oh, thank God. You should be like, thank God you're not that way. Oh, that's great. What can we do to make it more people like that? Rather than being like, you can't defend you can't say that stuff. I mean, it just makes me crazy that we've created up another law that says, well, you can't even defend yourself now. I mean, how is that any different than the conservative evangelicalism a lot of us grew up in? And, then we turn to this other thing, and it's got this law that says, oh, you can't defend yourself, and you can't talk about nuances, and you can't do this stuff, and you can't say that some people are different. Matter of fact, I would say most people are different than what people usually say the big judgments are. So I've never been a fan of big, broad strokes of judgment. It's very easy to make, but it's like, yeah, you're only seeing people on TV. You're not seeing small people all over the world, or churches all over the world, and a human interaction all over the world. You're just seeing like what the news shows you and what you read in magazines and things like that, and that's not reality. I hate to break your bubble if you think that is reality. So let's go a little bit further into this. Galatians 5:1. Galatians 5, where are you? 1 through. For freedom of Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery. Listen, I, Paul, am telling you this. If you let yourself be circumcised, Christ will be of no benefit to you. Once again, I testify to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obligated to obey the entire law. You who want to be justified by the law have cut yourselves off from Christ. I believe that was a pun intended. You have fallen away from grace. So fall from grace isn't when you make a mistake or you do something bad. Like there was a movie about my parents called Fall from Grace. Like, oh, look, they fell from grace because they went bad. They did this, whatever. Fall from grace is when you rebuild this law, when you rebuild a system that doesn't allow grace in. We fall from grace when we reconstruct a system that says don't let people defend themselves. Don't let people ask questions. When we become legalistic with whatever our belief system is and our faith is when we keep people out and we create this law that doesn't allow people to become into community. That's what happens when we fall from grace. When we realize grace is anarchy, we're with grace. Grace is there. We realize grace is for everyone. Grace accepts everyone, and this is a journey. But when we become guardians of the grace, we make it in vain, and we get cut off and we fall from it. Even though it's still there for us, we're just making it as though it doesn't exist in our lives or in other lives. He who lets himself be circumcised and he's obligated to obey the entire law. Well, hopefully, a lot of us American men are circumcised, so hopefully we're not have to follow the law, but let's go a little bit further to make sure. You who want to justify by the law have cut yourselves off from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. For though the Spirit of by faith we eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness, which means right living. We by the Spirit of grace, we hope for that. We enter in that. I will say when you realize that you don't have, there is a line from East of Eden, like, now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. I've always thought of like, that's how grace is. It's one of those things, now you're free, you can go, oh, now not everything's permissible but not beneficial, that your life becomes a little bit different. You go, oh, okay, now I'm not doing it because I think God would. Like for me, I always thought God wanted me to stop drinking and hated me. And then when I realized God loved me if I was drunk in a ditch, I went and joined a 12-step program. It was all of a sudden like I was permissible. I could do it. But now it was not about making God happy. It was about me having life with peace and a life with better friendships and things like that. Like it wasn't all about, oh, I've got to please God. It wasn't, this forbidden thing. That forbidden fruit looks really sweet when you're not supposed to have it. So you want to be justified by the law. You have cut yourself off from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. For through the Spirit by faith we eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus neither circumcision, okay, here you go, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything. There you go. Doesn't count for anything. So some of those laws and those regulations that we've learned, they don't count for anything. The way we've been told to, don't listen to secular music, don't do this, you've got to vote this certain way. See, those aren't counting for much, or if anything. If people tell you that has to do with your salvation. For Christ, Jesus is neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything. Now listen to this, here we go. I'm going to hit you with this. This is the big crescendo. And then I'm going to ask a few questions. The only thing that counts is faith working through love. The only thing that counts is faith working through love. If you want to know more about what love is, read Corinthians 13. I did a thing on it recently where it was I was talking about like we could move mountains, we could give our bodies up, we could give everything we have to the poor, but without love, it's just a clanging noise. It's just a loud cymbal. It just doesn't make sense. It's just noise. It's all noise. Without love, it's all noise. So that's and Corinthians 13, love doesn't demand its own way. It keeps no record of when it's been wronged. It never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful. It says it endures through every circumstance. So if you want to talk about doing tough stuff, There's your tough stuff. If you want tough stuff to do in your Christianity, you feel like, oh, I really want to do tough stuff so I feel like a real Christian, jump into that. Love your enemy as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Just love your partner as yourself. You know what I mean? Those are things that you can work on if you really feel like you want to grow a little bit more. But with grace, when we know that we're accepted and that they're accepted, it becomes a little bit easier to love others despite their flaws, despite their difference, despite our flaws, and despite our differences, you know. So, it's a big change. He's, Paul's saying that, there's no longer this rituals and superstitions aren't what Christianity is about. It's not how Christianity works. Burying some bacon in the backyard isn't going to make you more Christian. Having the tip of your penis cut is not going to make you more Christian. But we keep trying to come up with a new circumcision. You notice that? Like there's always because it's really hard to control people. It's really hard to motivate people if we don't have some sort of little carrot, or something to warn or threaten. It's often that's the key to motivation of people. I saw a preacher, some of these pastors, we become, and it's easy to come out of touch. When you're speaking every week, some of these pastors are making content all through the week. Some of these, and so they're just coming up with stuff. And some of it's just pure garbage. I saw a preacher the other day being like, these people are going to see the wicked and they're all turning into witches. All these women are becoming witches. I'm like, that's not happening. That's not, my daughter loves Wicked. We've watched it here 5 times at my house. None of us have decided to become witches. We think they're cool witches, but we're not oh, well, let's become witches. It's just, it becomes you start to fight against fiction. You start to fight against things that don't, fantasy, because you just have nothing more to say. Because saying you are loved and you are accepted and that you have grace, doesn't seem like a whole lot to say. Or when you start to realize what that means is you're going to say, well, I'm going to love my neighbor. So now you're saying Jewish lives are as important as Palestinian lives. And both of these people need to find peace, and we've got to stop this killing. Then you start to say, well, if we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, then everybody, kids should have free meals, even if my taxes go to pay for their free meals and I don't have children. Because that's loving your neighbor as yourself. That's loving those children as yourself. That's when those things come in. And I feel like sometimes to avoid having to say those things and to avoid keeping ourselves accountable to really loving others and being humans and practicing equality, we have to go, well, what can we say to scare people? Well, people are becoming witches, or this, back in the 80s, the music is satanic if you play it backwards. It's just, it becomes bizarre, right? The lady who's working in the White House who was selling guardian angels. It just doesn't make any sense. And what makes sense is faith expressing itself in love. And the Apostle Paul says that's the only thing that matters. In Corinthians 13, he says 3 things will remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these are love. When Jesus is at the Last Supper, he goes, I'm giving you a new commandment. I want you to love each other because the world will know you are mine by your love for one another. Boom. People say, oh, Jay, you sound like a broken record. That's right. I do sound like a broken record because that's it. Just trying to get it in. That's what it is. Why were people so drawn to my mother? Why have there been plays and documentaries and drag queens that dress like my mom and talk about my mom and love my mom? Is because my mom was always saying, you are loved. Jesus loves you just the way you are, period. God makes no junk. That concept of love is radical, and it changed people's lives. It gives people hope. It helps people learn to accept themselves and to accept others. And people are hungry for that. But for some reason, people fear that as well because, well, it won't line up with my denominational laws and rules and regulations, or it won't line up with my politics or things like that. Be honest with you, if you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, you're always going to have conflicts, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent. You're going to have a real hard time justifying any type of war, any type of violence, it's always going to be a struggle. Those are where the struggles will lie. The struggles won't lie like, should I buy this CD or should I see this movie or should I do, no, you're going to be like, should I purchase this shirt because it's made, where is it made? Or, is my iPhone really that important? Or is my, where do my bananas come from? Or where do my diamonds? You start to think that way. You just become a liberal social justice hippie. In some ways, but you can't become one of those folks who says, well, if you don't follow my social liberal ways, then you're out as well. It doesn't make room for exclusion. It doesn't make room for scapegoating. It doesn't make room for dividing one another and tearing one another apart. It makes room for speaking the truth. It makes room for justice, but it's truth and justice with love and grace. And that's a difficult task. It's hard to correct somebody and love somebody at the same time. It's hard to have relationships where you're debating and arguing each other all at the same time, and you know what? Some of those times you got to slow down and say, I just want to remind you, I love you and I care about you. Yesterday I had to tell somebody, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry if I was a little bit hostile in our conversation. Sometimes I'm a little bit edgy because there's so much going on in the world right now. So forgive me for being, a little bit tough. And you move on. And this is the revolution. I had to call up church leaders recently and said, because I didn't want to have somebody whose had rumors spread about them, and they didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want to deal with the fact that those rumors are fake and not true, and that's what we're dealing with in the church. As a church that just is more concerned about comfort than loving other people, whether it's a liberal church or a conservative church. It's often you'll see that the reason that what gets in the way of the love is that they start to lose control, or it makes them uncomfortable, and they have to deal with things that they don't like. And loving other people can be really tough. Loving each other can be really tough. Praying for your enemies can be really tough. Having hope right now can be tough. But like I said, Paul said the three things, most important things, are faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Again, Paul says faith expressing itself through love. Jesus says, love your neighbor. Then they have people, well, who's my neighbor? And then he tells the son the story of the Good Samaritan. So it really continues to push us. And the Good Samaritan, why is the Good Samaritan why do we call him good? Is because he didn't think about what's going to happen to me if I stop to help this person. He thought, what's going to happen to them if I don't stop and help them? Even though that them, the person he was stopping to help, was a community that usually judged him for his nationality, showed prejudice against him, did not recognize his existence or his right to belong. Yet he said, I see you, and you are alive in what's going to happen to you if I don't stop. You're going to die, and I can't let that happen. That's the type of love we're talking about here. And like I said, it's progress, not perfection. And and a lot of us nowadays, we become so pop psychology. We're just like, well, I can't talk to anybody who doesn't recognize me or doesn't see this or that. Yes, you can. You can talk to them, and you can love them. And it's not going to be easy, and it might be triggering, so you might have to do it slowly and learn how to deal with those things. But yes, you can. Because what you've got to do is you've got to get out of the concept of what's going to happen to me if I go to those people. You have to start thinking what's going to happen to those people if I don't go to them. That's where the love goes. And if you can learn to love yourself, which is vitally important, and accept yourself, maybe you can learn to love them. And you don't have to like them. You don't like the things they do. I mean, Reverend King, we've said this a million times, Reverend King said, I don't like that they burn my house down and that they lynch my friends and family. But I love them because they breathe in air, they're alive, and they're human beings. And so he always saw his enemies as people who needed to be converted or helped or restored from misinformation. This is really beautiful stuff. It should get you excited. It gets me excited. So, faith expressing itself in love. Love is the only thing that counts, and that's it. It's just not really fun to write in your mission statement. We just had to apply for a thing where a company will match donations. And we filled the whole thing out and all this kind of stuff. And for some reason, we still didn't get there because it's really hard to say we just love people and we let people from different belief systems and stuff come together and we have tough conversations and we do that. We've been here for 30 years. But sometimes even that just doesn't seem that doesn't line up to seem like it's enough, is to love other people. And that's a sad state that we've got ourselves in, because it's really tough to do so. And loving people is feeding the homeless, is helping people get food and groceries, is helping things through that. There's so many things you can do to love others and to love the least of these and to speak up for the least of these. And often, sometimes, unfortunately, even our enemies become the least of these. You know, we'd rather cut our genitals than love people. And I think that's what's happening. Like, I'd rather just get circumcised than have to deal with this group of people. I mean, look at the world right now and how divided it is, and how we're treating each other, and how we treat each other, and how we speak to each other. I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. You know, I mean, you know, and Paul said, you know, are you going to go back to following weak and beggarly spirits? I mean, talk about following weak and beggarly spirits, for fuck's sakes, excuse my language. I mean, we've really gotten good at that. You know? I mean, I feel like the politics have become such an idol now to us all. I mean, it's a shame. But it's faith through love. How do we not get it? You know, back in Galatians 4:20, in Galatians 4:20, probably not going to get a lot of 4:20 jokes at church. It says, I wish I were present with you. This is Paul says, I wish I was present with you now and could change my tone, for I am perplexed about you. You know, he was like, I'm perplexed, like you're going back, that you're getting away from grace, that you're going back into this legalistic system. And I saw this happen quite often, especially in our Atlanta, where we dealt in Atlanta when we had a much younger congregation, you know, a lot of people in their late teens, early 20s and things like that, who would come to Revolution and just be so excited about it, you know, and then they would meet somebody else, you know, another Christian, and they start going to their church, and they would come back. I wouldn't see them for a while, and all of a sudden I'd see them at a show or something. And they'd be like, you know, Jay, you know, that stuff you're preaching is just license to sin. It's just really bad. And I would just be perplexed because they came into Revelation and they were so excited about grace. And then they just went back into like this legalistic system because they'd started dating a boy or a girl that were involved in a type of church that was more legalistic and more judgmental, and then come back and tell me that, oh, I'm the bad guy. You know, I'm the bad guy now. And it would perplex me. And so I understand this, is that it's so often to fall back into those things. That's why sometimes I think maybe coming to church online once a week is best for a lot of us, because it's really easy to get caught up in that world where they start throwing these religious, man-made religious ideas on us, you know, these concepts that aren't really there, and then start pouring that on us, especially when we've unlearned it, but we still have that voice in the back of our head that's like, oh, good works, oh, abstaining from things, oh, you know, coming back in our, like me reading that ADHD book, like, well, maybe I'm just maybe I'm the exception, I'm just a lazy one, I don't have ADHD, you know what I mean? That kind of thing of like, we have a hard time letting go of those religious voices we heard, and those negative, and sometimes they're with people we loved and cared about, so they're really hard to break free from that stuff. Perplexed, you know, how do we stay silent about people starving and bombed children? You know, is that love when we do that? I mean, I have so many people reach out to me and say, well, Jay, I'm afraid you're not being balanced enough about what's going on in Gaza and things like that. And I'm like, okay, you know, I'm really trying to be. I don't support Hamas, you know, but I also don't support the bombing of all these. I don't like the fact that we're selling billions of dollars worth of bombs and kids are starving to death. This just, you know, and often the people who are coming to correct me aren't saying anything. They're just more concerned that I'm saying too much, or that I'm saying too much on one side, and they don't even bother to watch these talks, you know. So our silence also can often say a lot about us. And I understand silence when we're uncertain and we're trying to figure out what the right thing is to say, but our silence about certain things is just, you know, is that love? Are governments love? You know, are our politics love? Faith expressing itself through love? Is Christianity Today really love? Not the magazine, but just Christianity Today in general. I mean, is it love? Is it faith expressing itself in love? That's the question I'm asking you. I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound really judgmental and harsh, but I don't believe it is right now. I don't believe it is. I don't think so. So I guess the question is what will I do? What will we do? will we be like the Good Samaritan and start thinking, what will happen to my legalistic brothers and sisters if I don't speak to them, if I don't talk to them? What will happen if I don't start to speak out when my government, when unjust laws become, when laws become unjust, when I don't rebel against injustice, when I don't stand up for the least of them, when I don't fight for the fact that children should be able to have 3 meals a day, no matter what, if I'm living in the richest country in the world? You know, what will I do? You know, combine religion and politics together? You know, I am a critic of a lot of politics, and I get that. So people feel like that's political in itself, and it may be. But for me, it's with the hope of aiming towards more love and more grace for others. You know, if I can influence a system that takes part of all of our lives, also gives us highways and things like that, but be it more loving and to help people feel more accepted and the kids to grow up safer, and for, you know, people to not be scapegoated, no matter if they're children or my transgender brothers and sisters, or even conservatives. You know, I don't like scapegoating conservatives either. I think that's really easy. I mean, a lot of the stories I tell about people who changed my life forever were very conservative evangelicals, but they showed me a lot of love, and they showed me a lot of grace, and they showed me a lot of patience. There were fruits there. You know, I can't deny that. I can't deny that that's one of the reasons I'm sitting here, you know. So there's so much nuance that I can't scapegoat a whole group of people. I can't say all evangelicals. I have to say not all evangelicals. You know, oh, well, you're not supposed to say that. Well, it's just true. So, you know, the truth is you know, takes care of itself. I don't even have to say it, to be honest with you, because it's going to take care of itself. But I feel the conviction to say it. And I think that's what Paul's saying to us, is we've got to figure out a way to become less divided and not allowing, and he's literally saying, do not allow religion, do not allow following weakless and beggarly spirits into our life to do that, to not allow the politics to come in and to separate us and tear us apart, because there's a part of this, and we'll get to it very soon, that says, you know, do not, you know, be careful, because if you're not careful, you're going to bite and devour one another. You're going to tear each other apart. Beware of that. So what will we do? Well, maybe we'll start looking at faith expressing itself in love. When we get into this in the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about the fruits of the Spirit and what that means, and how those work, and what that looks like. But I hope this just today gives you a little bit of a thought of what Paul's trying to say to us. And I'm putting today's spin on it. I'm putting a very spin on it right now. How could we apply this to our lives right now? And that's the idea, is, you know, what really is love, and what's separating us from that, and what's separating us from showing that. And I think those are the tough questions we have to ask ourselves every day. And we have to be willing to unlearn certain things. But also, when we unlearn them, you know, not create an enemy of those who taught us, because I'm not always sure that those who taught us can necessarily be held accountable. Some of those folks just grew up in ignorance, and others know exactly what they're doing. That's when it comes down to us having to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove, you know, and how we read folks and understand folks, and not making sweeping judgments. So that's the message of Revolution today. And I do believe it's a Reformation message that needed today, and we've got to start working on this. But it's really just the same message that Paul the Apostle was preaching. You know, a lot of people don't realize, like, the first 300 years of Christianity, it was nonviolent. It was practiced nonviolence until Constantine came along. A lot of people, most Christians, wouldn't serve in the military, wouldn't fight, wouldn't battle. You know, that's why they were often killed or taxed higher or things like that, and persecuted, because people said they were unpatriotic. How does that sound? Familiar? All right, folks. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming out to Revolution. Listen, as always, we can use your support. It's a tough go right now. It's been tight, very tight budget lately. And you can help support this work at revolutionchurch.com. And all your donations are tax deductible. We have a Venmo and we have a PayPal. And it really does help get the bills paid. Takes care of this and allows me to do this work. I'm doing some other jobs so I can do this work as well, because I love this work. But your support really makes a huge difference in how this work gets done. So I appreciate that. And I'm trying to make a fair wage just like anybody else. So peace, guys. Love you. Thank you for all your love and your grace and your support. Love each other. You know, go out there and ask yourself today, what are we going to do? What am I going to do next? How am I going to love more? And how am I going to turn that into something that is transformative? Because grace is very transformative, folks. If you help someone understand grace, I mean, I'm so grateful for that day D.E. said I was trying to earn my salvation. He literally said, you are full of shit. You're trying to earn your salvation. And it changed my life. Someone telling me I was full of shit changed my life. Usually some of the biggest moments in my life that have changed me were people saying, I want to call you out. I think you're being a hypocrite about this, or that you need to do this. Like I shared that story with George about how when I was 8 or 9 years old online just recently about how I said something bad about his car and he confronted me on it, and it just changed my life forever. Changed a part of the way I think about things and stuff and people and how I talk to people and what I say about people. So sometimes, you know, those confrontations and when we confront one another, it can be huge moments, you know, huge moments that make us better and that sharpen us and that make us more loving and more graceful to others and to ourselves. So I hope that gives you some hope today. All right. Thank you all. I will see you next Sunday. Hopefully we'll continue in Galatians unless something crazy happens, and we'll just deal with it when we get there. Bye-bye.